Mike, thanks for joining Steve and I in today's session. Certainly one of the pillars of the contract manufacturing world are the quiet assassins behind it, the people who finance it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Mike.
I'll try not to take offense by that word.
Well, maybe not the right word after the weekend. So anyway,
Yeah.
but certainly, the quiet hand behind everything that happens. I pulled a stat up in prep for our show, and there's been more than $125 billion deployed into medical device out of the PE world in more than 870 companies in the last decade. I would say that is an order of magnitude that's important for the OEMs and our patients. What do you think?
Oh, very much so. I think we all know the big blues, as we refer to them, the Medtronics, the Boston Sci, and the St. Jude. They're reliant upon private money to fund innovation. And there's different levels of that funding. There's angel investors, there's VC investors, there's growth investors, and then there's all types of private equity investors. There's 5,400 registered private equity firms in the US alone. And they all have different shapes and sizes, and Vance has a unique shape and size. But yeah, they're all fueling medtech. Or many of those, not all 5,400, but certainly the private equity investing side is fueling advanced medtech.
Yeah, and you just raised another fund, if I'm not mistaken, that was oversubscribed and closed in April. Can you share that with Steve and I?
Yeah. So over the last 20 years, Brian Martin and the team at Van Street and I have been uniquely focused at this space. We are growth equity funding high-tech medtech. And so that's very different than many of our peers and competitors. But our most recent fund is $775 million. What's behind that is our investors that love what we do. What you see on the cover letter, that 775, is actually just a small portion of our dry powder, as people like to refer to it. We have wonderful investment partners that love what we do. And so to us, whether it's 775 or 1.5 or 3.0, that's almost irrelevant to us. It's really of finding great companies, finding how we can help them grow, and then getting the right investors that see the vision the way we do.
Steve, you and Mike have known each other for years. What's your perspective as a leader in the industry on what PE brings to that contract world?
Yeah, I've seen a huge growth in the involvement of PE in this med tech space, and it certainly brings a lot of capabilities, equity, the ability to invest in new talent and resources, and it's a huge driver in the industry.
Yeah. And Mike, there's different types of PE firms. When people think about PE firms, I know when I'm calling on behalf of my clients and building out one of their organizations, people worry about it being buying a damaged asset, prettying it up, putting budgets around shoelaces, really tough environment to work in, and then getting that lipstick on a pig sold. But there are much more constructive, positive environments out there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And yeah, certainly PE, as I mentioned, comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Vance Street's a growth partner. So we view every company we partner with on a journey, and whether it starts at 50 people or starts at 200 people or starts at 500 people, we have conviction in the future of their growth, and we're going to fund that with equity. That's what makes us very different. I mean, a lot of people have this impression that PE shows up and wants to take cash out of the business. As a growth partner, we're the exact opposite. We get to know the families and the business as well. Fair market value is what we pay for these businesses. We're not looking for good deals. That's not really what we do. We're scouring the country looking for great assets and great management teams. And when we find them, we're asking them lots of questions. What do you need to grow? Do you need $1 million ERP system? Do you need 3 more buildings? Do you need a facility in Costa Rica or Mexico because your big customer wants you to be there? So most generally, and as I've worked with Steve for many years, when we buy a company, not only do we, partner with the leadership team, but we bring, millions of dollars to the balance sheet to prepare for the first few years. So that's a very different model.
Steve, what has been your experience in those areas as you watch these organizations, especially like Van Street will partner with? Where do you see it as the person who's working, in the middle of the milieu of the manufacturing and the specialty? What should we know about that relationship?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's certainly advantageous to have somebody that understands the market, right? You could have a private equity firm that comes in that doesn't really understand medtech. We see a lot of the strategic companies, like the larger industrial companies, involved in this space now more, and that maybe has an electronics background. So I think, if you're a founder run business, it seems like a more seamless opportunity to work with somebody that is in the space and understands it and the nuts and bolts of the space.
And the specialization, Steve, you and I chatted about it in one of our last sessions about how materials issues and process opportunities are almost more important than the product itself. And that expertise lies within one of the properties that a PE firm like Van Street might acquire.
Yeah, it seems like all that know-how, not all of it, but a lot of that know-how, resources, technology has been, shifted off to the contract manufacturing space as the OEMs want to kind of push off the value stream towards the contract manufacturing space. We've seen that for many years now, and it continues.
You use the word original equipment manufacturer. Well, that's a bit of a fib. We've got to think of a new word because it's not originating out of there. It's actually, Mike, originating out of companies that you own or you're seeking to own.
Yeah, so each of the companies that we partner with, they have a value proposition that tends not to be a product, but a process. And those processes enable the products being what Medtronic sells in a hospital, or Boston Sci, or St. Jude, or W.O. Gore, these beautiful big OEM companies, but they rely upon companies like us to push the limits. What we get most excited about is, call it the miniaturization of medtech. How small can we go? And what the big customers want is the highest CPKs. They want to know that they're not going to get 100 good parts. They're not going to get 10,000 good parts, but they're going to get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of good parts, all within their design parameters. And so what we talk about in a, call it a product roadmap, it's a process roadmap. How do we get every extruder to make tighter tolerances? How do we get every lathe to make tighter tolerances, but still meeting the cost objectives? Because these things need to be affordable. So it's a different mindset when we look at these companies. It's not a products-based business. We're contract manufacturers.
Yeah. So the OEMs own the design, the CMOs own the process.
Yeah.
And that's becoming more and more obvious. Mike, what's the thesis? You have obviously investors that are trusting you to make these decisions. Do PE firms generally have a thesis, whether it's based on technologies, markets, geographies, going after either companies that require growth capital or maybe remediation? How would you best describe Van Street's thesis in general across those sort of categories?
Yeah, so starting with our investor pool, these are institutional investors. These are big insurance companies and pension funds and college endowments. And the list of names that are names that you would talk every day, the colleges that have invested in us, the insurance companies. So they're looking for long-term investing. And once again, that's different about Van Street from other PE groups that may want quick flips and quick returns and high scorecards on their report cards. And that's generally, clearly our investors want to see nice returns, but they understand in these highly regulated environments, it takes time. It takes time to build great companies. And so that's the investor pool we have, is they know it does take time to build a building in Costa Rica or a factory in Mexico, if that's what your customer wants, or a sales office in Ireland. So hopefully that's answering the question the way you asked.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how many deals do you target per year in medtech, health tech? And then how many deals do you have to review in order to end up with that number of investments?
Yeah, great question. So the stats for last year, 2023, and then rolling into 2024, we look at over 850 deals per year. And those are deals that meet our investment criteria. We're not looking at laundromats. We're not looking at dry clean. These are manufacturing companies. So we look at 850 per year, and our goal is to find 3 to 4. So that's our funnel of work.
Wow. And how long would that diligence take, just generally speaking, when we think about that? Because if, gosh, the person power required to go through, okay, 800 plus, well, right off the gate, you could shave, let's do the Pareto. 80% of those are not even worth more than 1 hour review, but the other 20% are, let's dig in deeper. So that brings me down to 160, which is one every other day on deep diligence. And then when I end up at 3, how long does that from start to finish on average, if there is an average, does diligence take?
Well, I mean, the vast majority, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% we flush out and call it, less than an hour. There's just attributes about it that we don't like. We are not a turnaround shop. We use car analogies a lot. We're looking for, barn find cars. The old Corvette that got tucked away 20 years ago that, the owners, the family, they had a wonderful career and they, their interests just drifted elsewhere. Or we're looking for companies that have been pushing the cutting edge of science and just need a financial backer to push a little faster or push a little harder. So to answer your question though, those that we're interested in, you have to separate the type of investments. When I say 4 per year is our goal, that's 4 brand new companies, brand new platforms. Once we acquire a platform, we would typically do a few tuck-ins. Maybe it's a product, maybe it's a capability, maybe it's a company. So over the last 18 months, we did 18 tuck-ins.
Wow.
So, we're saying we're essentially buying something once a month. It could be small, it could be 6 people and a product and 1 molding machine. But there's something special about what they're making that got us excited.
That's
kind of bolt-on technology, for instance.
Bolt-on technologies.
That's
exactly.
accretive to the existing platform technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it looked like, I was reviewing the PE world, and the number of medical devices deals that were done in 2021 were just insane. And I think in general, everything went insane in 2021 on an overbuy and over invest perspective. And then it dropped off precipitously. There were 98 deals, 87 in 2022, although the dollar volume was down dramatically. In 2023, it even dropped off further. Is that appetite? Is it bogeys available in the marketplace? I mean, after a while, if there's 100 Vance Streets out there playing and shaking the trees and looking for deals, after a while, this is not a zero-sum game.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's the big companies ring the bell, and Vance Street's relatively small and boutique in the world of private equity. The KKRs, the Carlyles, those are the ones that are really moving the metrics that you're referring to, Joe. And there's a cyclicality to it of availability. There's a cyclicality to it of, the debt rates, because that swings, kind of like mortgage rates on a house. So that's where we tend to see those metrics swinging back and forth. But for our target market, family-owned businesses that invented something or pushed some new technology that's bringing medtech to a new place, there's not a lot of cyclicality to that. It's just good old hard work of us building relationships with these families that trust us and want to partner.
I've made it public before. My favorite event every year, and I probably go to, I don't know, no less than 20 events per year, shows, if you will, is the MDM show out in California. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur and you're an engineer and you've cashed in your 401k to make something work, and you've leveraged your life insurance policies,
right.
And every person, I'd say 9 out of 10 people on that floor sitting in that booth are family that are related to the product that is standing in front of you as you walk that Byzantine of booths.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that same experience. That one and a handful of others just get me so excited. And like you said, walking the booth, talking to family-owned businesses, whether it's laser cutting technology or laser ablation that happens to feed really neat things like interventional and robotic surgery, micromolding, those types of technologies that are feeding, these diabetes self-injector systems. Micro needle making for the new weight loss drugs that just continue to change, the health across of all of us throughout the United States and the world. And to your point, these are family-owned businesses that had a vision and bet the farm, whatever their farm may have been, to push some technology.
Steve, you were going to say something. Sorry, I interrupted you before.
Yeah, no, Mike, you talk a lot about founder-owned companies, multi-generational family-owned businesses that you partner with. And you and I met through a corporate carve-out, right? And those seem to be few and far between. But can you talk a little bit about carve-outs and how those are structured and the opportunities there? And that particular example I gave you that we worked together, W.L. Gore, not only were there significant assets and capabilities in extrusion and catheter development and molding, but there was a book of business associated with it too, right?
Yeah, we refer to those as orphan assets, really high quality capabilities and technologies that just happen to be owned by somebody that aren't that excited about it anymore. When W.L. Gore bought Adam Spence, they had just developed their implantable stent. And so they wanted a delivery catheter for their implantable stent. So they bought Adam Spence. They found this awesome catheter, this awesome engineering technology. They went through some redesigns like they normally do, and they moved manufacturing out of that location. But behind the back wall, they were making the best high pressure braided tubing on the planet. That was for the angioplasty systems. And so W.L. Gore had no interest in angioplasty, quite the opposite. They were interested in stents. And so this is a funny story. For 8 years, I wrote W.L. Gore letters saying, please consider divesting this asset. I love angioplasty, and we can make a great business out of this. And then ultimately, they brought in a consulting group at the board level, and I heard they found one of my old letters and said, let's call these guys and see if they're still interested. And that core team of engineers, the technology in the labs there, incredible engineers there. And so that was why we carved that one out. So a lot of people think of carve-outs as poorer performing assets, where big companies just don't want to deal with them. We're looking for these crown jewels that just don't happen to fit the business model. RTI Surgical had some incredible engineers located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and they developed this really awesome sternum closure. And it was for a couple different markets. It was for people with frail chest, frail bones, such as women that have had breast cancer therapy. And so they couldn't use conventional methods when they went in for open chest surgeries. So they invented these awesome products. But RTI Surgical didn't play an implantable sternum closure. They weren't interested. And so that was another opportunity that we saw the products on the market. And we reached out and we were able to buy those products from them as a contract manufacturer. So those are the types of things we're looking for, Steve. We talk to the big strategics quite regularly. We're friendly with whether it's Edwards Lifescience and all these companies we've been talking about. And we're asking them, do you have any orphan assets, or do you have suppliers that can't deliver, the on time you need or the CPKs you're looking for? And so that's what drives our funnel, is looking for great technologies that maybe just aren't owned by the right people.
Takes a lot of persistence too. 8 years of sending letters. Good job. There's probably a lot of those cases, right?
What's a letter?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. That used to be snail mail.
Yeah,
I literally licked the envelope and put it in the mail years ago.
So, my last question here, Mike, is you've got to look down range, obviously, as you invest, these the funds towards technologies, properties, processes. what are you keeping your eyes on in the med tech industry for the emerging markets that are coming? Obviously, if you can get there with the Gretzky skate to where the puck is,
Right.
what are you forecasting without giving competitive, insights to those who are also shopping alongside you? What are you keeping your eyes on?
Yeah, no, great question, Joe. I mean, this dates back almost 20 years ago when the core team at Vance Street were working for a different PE group. We used to have these strategy sessions, and we would read these big market reports from the market research leader. And at that time, we were saying, who are the leaders in TAVR, replacing a heart valve through your leg? And we mapped out every component. These are the leading extruders, these are the leading braiders, these are the leading delivery systems. And we took apart the bills of material and then went out to find who the contract manufacturers were. That's dating me back. I mean, TAVR is an incredible procedure, incredible engineers at those OEMs. So this huge model that we started 20 years ago, we just keep growing upon it every year. Then came on robotic surgery. So we would go to the trade shows of robotic surgery and we look at all the bits and pieces and we'd talk to the engineers and say, what type of technical breakthroughs are you looking for? Maybe it's MEMS, maybe it's micro-injection molding, maybe it's 3D printing. And then we would look to our lists of who the big contract manufacturers are. And if they hit our criteria, we'd invite them to our MDM trade show, our happy hours there. Mm-hmm. So we have verticals that we've been tracking for a long time. The diabetes world, if you can't read any stat to say as we're all living longer and diabetes is becoming more manageable, who's making all that neat stuff? And if you look across our portfolio companies, 4 of them are providing products into that space. Different components, different features, just really technical little things. We like neuromodulation, right? All these neurotype issues of Parkinson's. And I love going to an R&D lab, such at Motion Dynamics, and watching them making these these neuromodulating components. And then just to go online and YouTube what they're being used for. I mean, we're an arm's distance, in some cases 2 arms distances away, but we're really driving the miniaturization of medtech, driving big changes, at the hospital and the clinical environment. So I hope I'm answering your question that, these are the spaces that, and they move slow. That robotic surgery is not relatively new, but oh my gosh, it's becoming mainstream, not just in men's health and women's health, but sports medicine and all these different applications.
Agreed. Yeah, no, it answers the question because I love the visual I get is just pulling on that string. Just keep pulling the string. And where's the value on that string? Oh, there's one. Oh, there's another one on the string, right? And then you go ahead and pursue those, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the metal side, and then there's the polymer side. I mean, incredible research is coming out of polymers. I mean, all these fluoropolymers, they have really incredible properties that can act as implantables. They can act as bridges and lattices, those that can carry some form of pharmaceutical or medication. Women's health has really benefited from that, and certainly the ophthalmic world. And we tend to think of med tech as more surgical, but the ophthalmic world is just amazing what they're doing with advanced materials there. So that's another way Vance Street triangulates. We watch closely to see what's coming out of whether it's University of Mass Lowell's and their research organization, or the big materials companies. We follow all that stuff through social media and other channels.
And through the MedX podcast.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Steve. Thank you.
It's
Had to
pinned,
throw that in there,
it's
Mike.
pinned to the top of his YouTube channel, right? Mike, additional question, Mike, do you ever forecast the PE world, at least in your category, moving a little further up towards getting their feet in the water, even on low-level regulatory oversight by the FDA and a 510K at all?
Yeah. So we have, when I was involved with Avalon Labs, we had our own line of end device products, and we did wonderfully there. And then a big OEM approached us and said, we think we could do a better job commercializing that because they have that global footprint. So it would be an early stage, but not high risk. We really don't want to get involved with the risk profile of, call it, animal studies and those types of things. It would, for Vance Street, our comfort level would be a 510K. but maybe smaller, higher performance, more advanced materials. Yeah, we're not shying away from those end device companies, but it needed to be a certain profile.
Mm.
But the big blues, as I keep referring to them, they're really good too. I mean, they are watching closely to see what technologies are coming up through the ranks, and they tend to invest early, and they invest in different ways. You know, I think many people be surprised how many of those types of companies are investing in early stage. So they get front row seats. So if they have a breakthrough technology, they're be able to commercialize it, or capitalize on it. So we don't have as much success there, Joe, just because the landscape tends to be very sophisticated and very competitive.
Yeah, and capital intensive in a different area that maybe is your expertise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steve, you have any questions with Mike before we head out?
Yeah, one more, Mike. You know, when Joe and I spoke last, we talked about the increased adoption of metals in catheters, metals-based catheters, and my own experience being on the Anchor Balloon project, this novel stent delivery system. It's a metals-based catheter, hypotube, and a laser welded core wire. With YTech and Motion Dynamics and some of the acquisitions you've done in that space, just wanted to get your perspective. Whenever we talk about Motion Dynamics or YTech, you're always telling me about a new building going up or the new equipment being installed with such passion. So if you can share some of that, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to think of catheters as, flexible tubing, fuel line, whether it's used to, provide us a pharmaceutical, or to, remove fluids from our body. But that's not the state of the art today. It's advanced catheters doing amazing things, whether it's our plumbing, but we need to steer, we need to navigate, we need to know their location. Once we get to whether it's a clot or whether it's some sort of aneurysm, we need to do work. And so a flexible tube can't do that work. And so to have torque and pushability and steerability and mechanical strength, you need to embed sophisticated metal parts. But these products need to be small. And so it's the miniaturization and it's precision machining, and it tends to be challenging materials. Mountain manufacturing is just experts at when you start getting into the column strength and YTech too. I mean, heat treating wires that are a third the width of your hair to get the right column strength and steerability. You can't hardly see these things in your hand, and we're managing the mechanical properties to go do some job, right? To push it through a clot or to deliver some type of aneurysm stent. So these are, heat treatable stainlesses. These are nitinols, and for the world of those that watch metals, nitinol is like pure magic, right? It's a memory metal, and you can program it just to do such cool things.
Yeah.
But the manufacturing is super sophisticated. If you've ever been around shape setting, it's not just metalworking. It's high tech, tight tolerance heat treating.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike.
Well, Mike, appreciate your time, my friend. Keep on hammering it. And just before we head out, I saw also that Vance Street was named as a top 50 PE firm this past year. So congratulations on that as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think the one you're referring to is top 50 for family friendly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us unique from our peers. And be delighted to talk about that if and when the time's appropriate, and what makes us different in that regard. But we have a playbook, we have a style, we have tools in our toolbox to make that transition of handing over the family business, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 generations, in a very soft, professional, respectful manner, versus thank you for the keys and you can step aside. That is totally not Vance Street.
Yeah, well, that's got to be some secret sauce, because there's such a legacy and a proud sort of, visceral, I guess, embedded body within that entire family line that they want to make sure that it's loved, it's appreciated. We're dropping it off to the right person. They're going to take care of it, and they're going to keep that legacy going. And that's the sense you always get when you're dealing with anybody from Vance Street.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time, as always, my friend. I'll be chatting with you soon. Steve, partner, thanks again for making this happen with Mike and the podcast.
Absolutely. It's been great.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right. Be
Thanks,
well.
guys.
I'm Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Be well.